At 4:03 a.m., my phone saved our lives. That's not poetry, that's fact. The red numbers on my bedside clock glowed like warning lights in the dark. 4:03. Not 4:02, not 4:05. I remember because when you reach 72, you stop taking small details for granted. The house was still, the kind of still that presses against your ears. Our farmhouse has its own language at night, wood settling, pipes ticking, wind brushing the porch screens. I've known those sounds for 50 years. I can tell the difference between a raccoon near the feed bins and a branch scraping the siding. But that night, something felt wrong. Beside me, Silas was breathing too heavily. Each inhale dragged, each exhale rattled. He had been sleeping hard lately. Too hard. I hadn't closed both eyes at the same time in 3 nights. When you've lived on the same land for half a century, you develop instincts. Storms announce themselves long before rain falls. So do people. And my daughter was sleeping under my roof. Tell me something. Have you ever woken up with the feeling that something in your own house was not right? Not broken, not loud, just off? Because that's how it starts. Quiet. My phone buzzed against the mattress. Not a cheerful ring, not a soft chime. A hard, urgent vibration that felt like it struck straight through my ribs. I reached for it before the second buzz. When your child texts you at 4 a.m., it is never casual. The screen lit up my hands. Gideon. My son does not panic. He does not exaggerate. He does not send dramatic messages in the middle of the night. He works private security 3 states away. Calm under pressure, steady voice, measured words. The message was in all caps. Mom, grab Dad and get out of the house. Don't trust your daughter. Immediately. I read it twice, 3 times. The words didn't change. There was no explanation, no greeting, no softness. Just urgency, just command, just warning. Let me ask you something. If your child sent you that message right now, would you question it or would you move? If this happened tonight, would you hesitate? Subscribe now, because hesitation can cost more than pride. My blood didn't run cold. It went still. That's worse. I turned my head slowly toward the bedroom door. The hallway beyond it led straight to the guest room, Sloane's room. My daughter had come home 6 months ago with designer luggage and a story about a failed investment, tears that never quite smudged her mascara, hugs that felt rehearsed. She said she needed peace. She said she needed family. But peace doesn't whisper on the phone at night, and family doesn't make your husband sleep like he's been drugged. Silas shifted beside me, muttering something in his sleep. His skin felt clammy when I touched his arm earlier that evening. He had blamed his age. I had blamed myself for worrying. Now my son was telling me not to trust my own child. There are moments in life when denial is a luxury. This wasn't one of them. If you ignore warnings like this, that's on you. Subscribe, because the truth rarely knocks twice. I slid out of bed without turning on the lamp. The floorboards knew my weight. They did not betray me. I moved toward the door, and that's when I heard it. Low, measured, controlled, a voice carrying down the hallway. Sloane was awake. I froze just before the staircase landing. Her bedroom door was slightly open. A strip of light cut across the hallway rug. She wasn't crying. She wasn't upset. She was calm. Too calm. I leaned closer. Is the notary ready? Silence. Then her voice again, quieter. Yes, he's completely out. My mother is stubborn, but she'll sign when she sees the evaluation. A pause. By sunrise, this dirt is ours. The words did not echo. They settled. Heavy. Final. Not confused. Not emotional. Planned. I did not gasp. I did not shake. When you reach my age, you learn that panic wastes oxygen. I stepped backwards carefully, back toward my bedroom, back toward my husband, back toward the red clock still glowing, 4:07. My son said, "Leave immediately." Now I knew why, but one question stayed with me as I reached for the canvas bag where I keep a certain side cover. I have stood on the same 40 acres of Georgia red clay for 50 years, long enough to remember how the soil smells before rain, long enough to remember every fence post Silas set with his own hands, long enough to understand what land does to people. It binds you, it tests you, it reveals you. The Montgomery peach orchard was never just property. It was survival. It was drought years and bank meetings where men in pressed suits tried to explain why we should consider selling. It was frost-bitten blossoms and harvest seasons that left our hands raw and cracked. We did not inherit comfort. We built it. Silas handled the tractors and the books. I handled the packing crews and the contracts. We were partners long before that word became fashionable. By the time I turned 72, I believed our hardest seasons were behind us. Our son, Gideon, had built a life rooted in discipline, structure, order. He called every Sunday without fail, asked about yields, asked about market pricing, asked about his father's hip. Our daughter, Sloane, called when she needed something. There's a difference. If you have more than one child, you know it. One builds, one borrows. One shows up steady, one shows up suddenly. And 6 months ago, Sloane showed up suddenly. She pulled into the driveway just before dusk. 3 designer suitcases, cream-colored, hard-shell, expensive. Not the luggage of someone ruined. She stepped out wearing oversized sunglasses and a linen jumpsuit that probably cost more than our monthly water bill. "Mama," she said, and folded into my arms like she'd been wronged by the entire world. Her perfume lingered long after she let go. Silas opened the door wide before she finished her story. "It was a boutique investment," she said, voice trembling at the edges. "The partners pulled out. I didn't see it coming." Boutique investment. That's a tidy phrase. Too tidy. I asked what kind of investment. She waved a hand. Lifestyle properties, short-term luxury rentals. It's complicated. Complicated is what people say when they don't want to explain. She said she needed space, said she needed to reset, said the city had drained her. I noticed she didn't look drained. Her nails were freshly done, hair perfectly colored, watch new. When someone loses everything, it shows, but she looked maintained. Do you have a child who only calls when desperate, or at least claims to be? Because desperation has a smell, and I did not smell it that evening. What I smelled was calculation, but I let her in, because mothers don't slam doors on daughters, even when instinct whispers. Gideon was raised on early mornings and responsibility. At 14, he could drive a tractor straighter than most grown men. At 16, he balanced the orchard's summer payroll better than I did. At 18, he left for training and never once asked for money. He called to give updates, not excuses. Sloane was different from the start. Soft hands, quick tears, faster smiles. She could convince her kindergarten teacher she deserved a second cupcake without raising her voice. She learned early that charm opens doors faster than effort. We corrected her, we tried, but some traits don't disappear, they refine. As an adult, she moved between cities like changing shoes. Atlanta, Charlotte, Dallas. Each place came with new ventures, new opportunities, new partners whose names we heard once and never again. Whenever something failed, it wasn't her fault. Markets shifted, friends betrayed her, timing was wrong. There is always a reason, never responsibility. Still, she was ours. We paid off one credit card when she was 28, co-signed a short-term lease at 31, helped with a bridge loan at 35. Each time she promised it was temporary. Temporary can stretch years if you allow it. And when she stood in my kitchen 6 months ago, sipping sweet tea and staring out over the orchard, I saw something in her expression. Not relief, assessment. Within the first week, she asked questions, not about family, about paperwork. Do you still hold the deed personally, Mama? Have you updated beneficiaries lately? What happens if one of you becomes incapacitated? She said the word casually, like it was a weather forecast. Silas laughed it off.
"We're not going anywhere yet," he said. She smiled at that, but she asked again 2 days later, and 3 days after that, she mentioned estate taxes. "You don't want the government taking a chunk of this land, right? I could help structure things." Structure. That word lingered. She began walking the perimeter alone in the evenings, taking calls near the equipment shed where reception is weakest inside the house. Once I passed by, she lowered her voice mid-sentence. Later that night, after she went upstairs, I asked where we kept important originals. I told her in the bank's safe deposit box. That was not true. A mother does not survive 50 years in business by being careless. We've all seen this smile before, the one that warms you while measuring the room. And I started asking myself a question I didn't want to form fully. What exactly had my daughter already filed? The first thing to disappear
was small enough that most people would have dismissed it. My grandmother's silver thimble. It has sat on the living room mantel since 1976, through renovations, through repainting, through seasons when the orchard barely broke even. I dust around it every Sunday. One afternoon, it was gone. Not misplaced, gone. I checked the sewing basket, the china cabinet, the kitchen junk drawer where odd things migrate. Nothing. When I asked Sloane if she'd moved it while cleaning, she tilted her head. "Mama, are you sure you didn't put it somewhere safe and forget?" Forget. Such a soft accusation. Silas chuckled from his recliner. "You do hide things sometimes, Bea." I smiled back at him, but my stomach tightened. I had not hidden it. I know the difference between aging and confusion. Still, I let it rest. Because one missing object can be coincidence. One missing object can be carelessness. But coincidence has a limit, and I was about to learn that. We keep a mason jar in the pantry labeled flour. It does not contain flour. It contains emergency cash, rolled bills, quiet security. Not a fortune, just enough to get through a storm if the bank systems ever froze or a crop check came late. I do not count it daily. I do not obsess over it, but I know the weight of it in my hand. One evening, I lifted it down to add $200 from a produce contract. It felt lighter. I removed the lid. $300 were missing. Not all of it, just enough to test boundaries. I stood there staring at the jar, listening to the dishwasher hum. When I asked Sloane if she had borrowed from it, she laughed. "Mama, I don't need pantry money." Then she added lightly, "Maybe Dad took some and forgot." Silas frowned. "I wouldn't." She placed her hand on his shoulder. "Of course you wouldn't mean to." Mean to. I watched her face as she said it. Sympathy wrapped around implication. This is how doubt is planted. Gently, carefully. Most people miss the first red flag. Because it rarely waves, it drifts. What's the first red flag you ignore? 2 weeks later, she began making Silas herbal tea at night. "Chamomile helps him sleep," she said. Silas had always preferred black coffee, even late, but age makes people flexible. He accepted it without argument. The first night he slept deeply, the second night deeper. By the fourth night, I had to shake him twice to wake him from morning chores. His speech slowed, his balance wavered. He blamed fatigue. "I'm just getting old," he said, rubbing his temple. Sloane would kneel beside him,
concern written across her face. "Maybe we should have you evaluated," she suggested once, "just to be safe." Evaluated. There was that word again. One evening, after she poured the tea and stepped out to take a call, I lifted the mug to my nose. It smelled faintly metallic. Not strong, not sharp, just wrong. I didn't accuse her. I switched the cups. I pretended to sip. Silas drank half. Within 20 minutes, his eyelids drooped. He dropped the remote and did not stir when it hit the floor. She never saw danger coming. Most don't. Subscribe. Because danger rarely announces itself loudly. It changes small routines. I began watching more closely. Not openly, quietly. Silas keeps his heart medication on a weekly pill organizer on the kitchen counter, Monday through Sunday, clear compartments. One afternoon, while Sloane was tidying, I saw her pick it up. She studied it longer than necessary. Later that night, after she went upstairs, I checked. Thursday's slot was slightly open. Inside, the pill looked different. Same shape, slightly darker color. I said nothing. The next morning, Silas stood from the breakfast table and gripped the edge. His knees buckled. The chair scraped loudly against the tile. I reached him before he hit the ground. His eyes were unfocused. "B," he murmured, confused. Sloane rushed in from the hallway. "Oh my God, Dad! See? I told you we need a doctor." Her voice was sharp now, urgent, not grieving, decisive. That's when it became clear. This was not forgetfulness. This was positioning. Silas tried to stand again. His legs failed him. And for one terrifying second, I thought he was about to collapse completely. Thatcher arrived on a Thursday afternoon in a car too polished for a gravel driveway. Black sedan, tinted windows, tires that had never known red clay. Sloane introduced him casually, like a neighbor stopping by for pie. "Mama, this is Thatcher. He's helping me manage some restructuring." Restructuring? He stepped forward with a handshake that lasted 1 second too long. His suit fit perfectly, navy, tailored, the kind of fabric that doesn't wrinkle even in August heat. But it was his teeth that caught my attention. Too white. Not natural white, artificial white. When he smiled, it felt rehearsed, like he practiced that expression in mirrors before meetings. "Mrs. Montgomery," he said smoothly, "you've built something remarkable here." Compliments delivered early are rarely free. Silas offered him sweet tea. Thatcher declined sugar, said he preferred clean habits. He looked around our living room slowly, not admiring, calculating. Walls, windows, crown molding, distance between rooms. I've spent decades negotiating crop contracts. I know when someone is measuring value. He wasn't looking at peaches. He was looking at equity. 2 days after his first visit, he returned with a leather folder. Sloane sat beside him at the dining table like a student awaiting approval. "We're just trying to simplify things for you," Thatcher explained. "At your stage in life, complexity becomes risk." Stage in life? Silas shifted in his chair. "What kind of risk?" he asked. "Oh, cognitive decline, tax exposure, liability. If something were to happen suddenly." Suddenly. Sloane reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "We just want to protect you."
Protection can be a generous word. It can also be leverage. Thatcher opened the folder and slid a few documents forward. Preliminary guardianship structure, he said. Nothing active yet, just planning. Planning for what? For a smooth transition, he replied, calm as a banker approving a loan. I did not touch the papers. Instead, I asked, and who would this guardian be? Sloane smiled. I would, Mama, of course. Of course. Protection or control? Because sometimes those two words sit so close they look identical. Would you sign without reading? Thatcher spoke in phrases designed to sound technical but harmless. Capacity assessment, medical affidavit, proactive estate transfer. He mentioned a physician he worked regularly, said evaluations were routine for couples our age. Routine. Silas bristled at that. I don't need someone testing my mind, he muttered. Thatcher nodded sympathetically. Of course not. This is merely precautionary. If paperwork is in place, it prevents confusion later. Confusion. There was that word again. The seed they'd been planting through missing items and foggy mornings. Later that evening, I found a brochure on the kitchen counter. Assisted living communities in Florida. Palm trees, white balconies, words like comfort and care. We had not discussed moving. We had not expressed concern.
Yet the brochure was there, waiting. When I asked Sloane about it, she shrugged. Just options, Mama. You never know. I knew enough. They were building a narrative, one where we slowly declined, one where she stepped in heroically, one where paperwork made everything legal. Legal does not always mean right. Over the next week, Thatcher's visits increased. Short meetings, closed doors, low voices. Once I walked past the study and heard him say, "If we establish incapacity first, the rest follows smoothly." Establish. Not prove, establish. As though reality were adjustable. Sloane began asking for copies of our identification, said she needed them for tax review. She requested our social security numbers to confirm beneficiary alignment. She even suggested we consolidate accounts under a single management system to reduce risk. Risk. I watched her as she spoke. Her eyes did not waver. She believed she was smarter than us. That belief is dangerous, because when someone thinks they are ahead, they grow comfortable, and comfort leads to mistakes. One afternoon, I noticed an envelope partially tucked beneath the sofa cushion. Official seal, county header. I did not open it. Not yet. But I memorized the case number printed in the corner. Because by then, one question had rooted itself firmly in my mind. What exactly has my daughter already filed? 4:03 a.m. I can still see it. I can still hear the faint buzz against the mattress. I read Gideon's message again while standing in the dark hallway. Mom, grab Dad and get out of the house. Don't trust your daughter. Immediately. No greeting, no explanation, just urgency. Gideon does not dramatize. He calculates. If he told me to leave, something had already crossed a line. Behind me, Silas shifted in bed. Ahead of me, my daughter whispered into her phone. By sunrise, this dirt is ours. Ours. Not hers. Ours. That meant partnership. That meant paperwork. That meant timing. Sunrise was less than 3 hours away.
I walked back into the bedroom slowly and closed the door without a sound. "Silas?" I whispered, touching his shoulder. He did not wake. I shook him harder. Nothing. The tea, the pills, the evaluation talk. It aligned too neatly. I leaned close to his ear. "The barn's on fire." His eyes snapped open. Fear still works when reason fails. I keep a canvas bag beneath the closet floorboard. Storm habit. You live in Georgia long enough, you prepare for wind. I pulled it free. Inside, cash, copies of identification, spare keys, a prepaid phone. I added the original deed, not the framed copy in the hallway, the real one, hand-signed decades ago. The paper that proves ownership beyond argument. Silas sat up slowly, unsteady. "Bea, what's happening?" "No time," I said. "Put on your boots." He tried to stand and swayed. I caught him. His weight felt heavier than usual. Drugged. The word formed quietly in my mind. I shoved his actual prescription bottles into the bag, not the organizer on the counter, the originals. My heart was steady, not racing, steady. There is a moment in danger when clarity replaces confusion. This was that moment. We did not use the main hall, too exposed, too visible. The back staircase creaks less if you step near the wall. I guided Silas carefully, one hand gripping his elbow, the other holding the bag. Halfway down, we heard her again. "The notary will confirm capacity decline," Sloan whispered. Silas froze. I tightened my grip. "Keep moving," I breathed. Rain began tapping against the kitchen windows. Soft at first, then harder. Good. Rain covers sound. We reached the mudroom. I paused by the stove. My hand moved on instinct. I lifted the cast-iron skillet. Heavy, solid, balanced. A 72-year-old woman does not outrun danger. She equalizes it. If your home turned unsafe tonight, be ready. Subscribe. Because readiness is not paranoia, it is survival. I eased the mudroom door open. Cold rain hit my face immediately. Sharp, clean, real. We stepped into the orchard. Boots sank into wet soil. Mud clung, pulled, slowed. Silas stumbled. I held him upright. "Just to the creek," I said. The truck keys were in my pocket. We did not use them. Engines wake attention. Attention brings confrontation. Halfway through the second row of trees, a porch light flicked on, behind us. I did not turn immediately. I did not rush. Panic wastes breath. When I finally looked back, I saw her silhouette at the upstairs window, still, watching. The light behind her framed her outline clearly. She scanned the driveway first. The truck was still there. Then her head turned toward the orchard, toward us. She knew. "Run," I whispered. Silas tried. His legs failed halfway between rows. I wrapped his arm over my shoulders and pulled. Rain soaked through my nightgown. Mud splashed up my calves. The creek shelter was less than 300 yards, but in darkness, 300 yards stretches. Only prepared families survive betrayal. Subscribe. Because blood does not guarantee loyalty. Preparation does. We reached the tree line near the creek just as headlights cut through the rain. A black sedan turned into our driveway. Not a sheriff, not a neighbor. Too sleek, too precise. Thatcher. The car door opened before it fully stopped. He moved fast toward the porch. Sloan burst outside seconds later, hair loose, phone pressed to her ear. "They're not here," she shouted into the storm. "The truck is still here." Her voice carried across the wet rose. Not frightened, angry, calculated. She paced, scanned, turned in a full circle. For a moment she looked less like my daughter and more like someone who had lost control of a transaction. Thatcher grabbed her arm, spoke sharply. She yanked free. Then she screamed into the darkness. Not my name, not her father's, just rage. Silas sagged against me. We reached the old hunting shack by the creek and slipped inside. I locked the door. Rain hammered the tin roof. My hands trembled for the first time. Not from fear, from clarity. They were not waiting for us to pass peacefully. They were accelerating it. I pulled out the prepaid phone. One question pressed louder than the rain. Who tipped Gideon off? Rain softened to a steady drizzle by the time headlights cut through the trees near the creek. Not the black sedan, an SUV, engine low, controlled. The driver's door opened before it fully stopped. A tall figure stepped out, scanning the tree line before moving forward. Gideon. He didn't call out, didn't risk it. He knocked twice on the shack door in a pattern only family would recognize. I opened it. His eyes moved over us quickly, assessing, not panicking. Silas slumped into the back seat as Gideon wrapped a wool blanket around his shoulders. "Dad's pulse?" he asked. "Slow. Too slow." Gideon's jaw tightened. No lecture, no wasted words. He drove 20 miles north of the orchard without headlights for part of the route, cutting through back roads until we reached a diner that opens before dawn for truckers and farmers. The kind of place where no one asks questions. We slid into a booth near the rear wall. The waitress poured coffee without comment. Gideon placed a thick manila folder on the table. "This is why I texted," he said quietly. The folder was heavy, not in weight, in consequence. Gideon pushed it toward me. "I've been monitoring Sloane's financial movements for 3 months," he said quietly. I opened it. The first document bore my name, Beatrice Montgomery, my signature at the bottom. Except it wasn't mine. The loop in the B was wrong, the pressure uneven, the slant too sharp. Forged. The second document listed Silas.
It declared cognitive deterioration consistent with advanced decline. Attached was a physician's affidavit, signed, stamped, official. The doctor's name was unfamiliar. The clinic address traced back to a medical office 2 counties over. Gideon tapped the page. "The doctor exists," he said, "but he never examined Dad." The next page detailed an emergency petition for temporary guardianship. Petitioner, Sloane Montgomery. Grounds, mental incapacity. Risk of financial mismanagement. Vulnerability to exploitation. Exploitation. That word twisted. The narrative was clear. We were confused. We were at risk. We required oversight. And our daughter was stepping in to protect us. Except protection was not the goal. Control was. Further down in the stack, a different jurisdiction header appeared. Not our county, a neighboring one. Notice of intent, presumptive death filing. My breath stopped. The document stated that in cases of advanced medical decline, combined with disorientation, a guardian could petition for expedited estate control if subjects were deemed missing or medically non-responsive. "They planned to move you first," Gideon said. "Florida, assisted living under her guardianship." Another brochure slid from the folder, the same facility brand as the one left on our kitchen counter. Palm trees, clean hallways, smiling retirees. "Once you were relocated," Gideon continued, "access to you would be restricted. All assets would transfer under oversight." Oversight, a sterile word for confinement. "And if we refused?" I asked. Gideon met my eyes. "You wouldn't have been given the chance." He flipped to another document, pre-drafted missing persons report, prepared in advance. filed digitally but scheduled for submission, time-stamped for 9:15 a.m. that morning. They erased us while we were breathing. The sentence left my mouth before I could soften it. Silas stared at the table. His hands shook slightly around his coffee cup. At the bottom of the folder was a business registration certificate, Apex Heritage Holdings, LLC, registered 3 months ago. Managing partner, Thatcher Reynolds. Address, a shared office suite in Atlanta. Purpose, listed agricultural asset restructuring. Restructuring. The orchard had already been appraised. A buyer had been contacted. A development group interested in converting farmland into luxury housing. Projected sale value nearly 10 times its assessed agricultural worth. Gideon slid over printed email chains. Slow's name appeared repeatedly. Wire instructions drafted. Contingency clauses written. Transfer schedule outlined. The speed of it was what stunned me most. Everything prepared, everything aligned, everything waiting for us to be declared incapable or absent. Gideon pulled out his tablet. I tracked IP logins tied to the house, he said. Document uploads, court portal access, insurance adjustments. Insurance. He turned the screen toward me. Our life insurance policy had been amended, beneficiary structure revised, primary control assigned under guardianship authority. Sloane's digital signature appeared beside the changes, time-stamped late at night while we slept, while Silas drank his tea. Is this greed or evil? Because greed wants money, evil wants removal. Silas finally spoke. What do we do? Gideon closed the folder slowly. We don't react, we respond. And in that booth, with coffee growing cold and rain still tapping the windows, I understood something clearly. Our daughter had not acted alone. She had acted confidently. Confident people believe they have already won. We did not return home immediately. Gideon drove us to a roadside motel 20 miles from the orchard, the kind with faded curtains and a vending machine that hums all night. Silas slept heavily in the second bed after Gideon confirmed his medication had been altered, not replaced, supplemented. That word carried weight. Gideon sat at the small desk reviewing copies of filings on his laptop. I stood by the window watching headlights pass along the highway. Sloane believed she controlled the board. She believed paperwork decided outcome. She forgot something important. The Montgomery orchard did not begin with us. It began long before courts digitized records, long before guardianship petitions could be submitted online at midnight. Some families passed down jewelry. Mine passed down contingencies. Gideon, I said quietly, turning from the window, drive me home before noon. He studied my face. You have something. I do. He nodded once. No more questions. We did not enter through the front door. Too visible, too expected. Instead, Gideon parked along the tree line behind the equipment shed. From there, we moved toward the old root cellar built into a slight slope near the back orchard. Sloane hated that place as a child. Too dark, too damp, too many spiders. She never lingered there long enough to explore. The cellar door creaked as I opened it. Cool air met us inside. Shelves lined with empty jars, old feed sacks, a rusted lantern hanging from a nail. Gideon followed without speaking. I walked to the far wall, counted bricks silently. 1, 2, 3, 4. On the 5th row from the bottom, 7th brick from the left, there was a slight indentation worn by time. I pressed it inward. The brick shifted. Behind it was a narrow cavity wrapped in oilcloth. I reached in and pulled out a long wooden box. Gideon exhaled slowly. What is that? Our insurance. We carried the box upstairs to the kitchen. The house was quiet, too quiet. I placed the box on the table and lifted the lid. Inside lay hand-inked land grants dated 1774, original survey documents, a notarized charter written in formal script, the Bloodline Trust. My great-grandmother insisted on it after her own brother attempted to sell a portion of the property during a financial panic. The trust established one unbreakable condition. The orchard could only be sold or transferred by the acting matriarch while she was alive and of sound mind.
no proxy, no guardian, no power of attorney, no temporary petition, no court-appointed override unless death was certified and uncontested. And even then, succession required direct confirmation from a pre-designated family executor, which was not Sloan. Gideon scanned the pages carefully. "This predates modern probate code," he said, "but it's binding. It was refiled every generation." "Yes," I said. "My mother updated it when I was 40. I updated it when Sloan was 30. His eyes lifted. "And the executor?" "You." Silence settled over the kitchen. Paper does not shout, but it holds authority quietly. Every strategy Sloan built depended on incapacity, on removal, on isolation. The bloodline trust made one fact unavoidable: I was still breathing. Gideon began photographing every page, uploading encrypted copies, cross-referencing with county records. "The guardianship filing doesn't override this," he said. "Even if she secured temporary authority, sale would be blocked." "And if she claimed mental decline?" I asked. He looked at me steadily. "Then she would need a court-certified evaluation from an independent physician, not a private affiliate," which she did not have. The narrative she built required silence from us, compliance, absence. But absence was no longer an option. I walked to the sink and stared out at the orchard rows stretching beyond the glass. 50 years of harvest, storm seasons survived, loans paid, children raised. "You see," I said quietly, closing the wooden box, "she thought she was negotiating with two elderly farmers." I turned toward Gideon. "Never underestimate the woman who built the house." For the first time since 4:03 a.m., I allowed myself a small smile, not out of relief, out of recognition. Sloan believed paperwork made her powerful. She was about to learn that legacy outlives ambition. And for the first time since her return, the balance shifted, not loudly, but decisively. We did not confront them immediately. That would have been emotional. Emotion clouds precision. Instead, Gideon accessed the home security system from the motel room. Sloan never asked about the cameras. She assumed age meant ignorance. The living room appeared first on the screen, clear, wide angle, audio enabled. Sloan stood near the fireplace holding a clipboard. Thatcher paced slowly behind her. He looked comfortable, too comfortable. They were not searching for us, they were inventorying. Thatcher gestured toward the antique hutch in the dining room. "Mark that as included," he said. Included, like it was already theirs. Sloan peeled a bright sticker from a sheet and pressed it onto the glass. "Sold." The word looked obscene on my grandmother's china cabinet. They moved methodically. Rug, credenza, grandfather clock. Sold, sold, sold. Silas watched from the motel bed, jaw tight. I said nothing. I wanted to see how far they would go. Then Sloan walked off camera and returned wearing something that made my chest tighten. My grandmother's pearl necklace, the one I hid inside a flour tin years ago. 3 strands, cream luster, hand knotted. She adjusted them at her collarbone while looking into the hallway mirror, admiring herself. Thatcher glanced up and smiled. "They suit you." "They were just sitting in a drawer," she replied. "Just sitting." Silas turned away from the screen. That hurt him more than the forged signatures. Not the land, not the money, the pearls. Because land is business, but pearls are memory. I leaned closer to the screen. "Zoom," I said quietly. Gideon enlarged the frame.
The clasp was slightly twisted. She had fastened it in a hurry. She didn't even know how to wear it properly. The next camera feed showed the dining table, papers spread out, a laptop open. Thatcher leaned over Sloan's shoulder. "Once the wire clears," he said, tapping the screen, "we'll finalize the guardianship notice. Timing matters." "Funds first," she replied. "Not hesitation, not conflict. Agreement." Gideon adjusted the volume. "Are we clear on transfer routing?" Sloan asked. "Yes," Thatcher answered. "Apex Heritage receives the primary deposit. Your share disperses after processing." Your share. She wasn't just reclaiming inheritance, she was profiting from removal. Silas spoke finally. "She was going to sell it before we were even declared missing?" "Yes," Gideon said. I folded my hands on the motel desk. Their confidence rested on one assumption, that we were either confused or gone. Late afternoon light filtered through the living room windows. Thatcher opened a bottle of wine from our kitchen rack. He didn't ask. He didn't hesitate. He poured 2 glasses. Sloane lifted hers. "To new beginnings," she said. They clinked, laughed. She raised the glass higher. "To freedom." Freedom. The word struck harder than anything else. Freedom from what? Parents? Responsibility? Conscience? She took a long sip, smiled, relaxed, like a deal had already closed. I felt something rise inside me. Not sorrow, not disbelief, resolve. I leaned back in the motel chair and looked at my son. She believes she's won. Gideon nodded once. She believes we won't come back. I studied the screen again. Sloane laughed at something Thatcher whispered. That laugh used to belong to a 5-year-old girl chasing fireflies. Now it belonged to someone calculating wire transfers. If your child did this, forgive or fight, comment. Because some betrayals test more than patience. They test identity. And if you're not subscribing, tell me why below. I want to know. At 1:52 p.m., a silver SUV pulled into our driveway. Not Thatcher, not Sloane, a third party. The developer. Mid-40s, gray suit, polished shoes not meant for gravel. He stepped out holding a leather portfolio and scanning the orchard rows with professional interest. He saw acreage. He saw potential. He did not see betrayal. Inside the house, Thatcher stood at the dining table, papers aligned precisely. Sloane hovered near the fireplace, pearls still around her neck. Wine glasses cleared away, faces composed. The developer entered, handshakes exchanged. "Beautiful property," he said. "It won't be agricultural for long," Thatcher replied smoothly. They sat, folders opened. The developer adjusted his glasses and skimmed the top page. "Guardianship confirmed?" he asked. Thatcher slid a document forward. "Temporary authority granted. The Ashenbys are incapacitated." Incapacitated. Silence. Pen poised, signature ready. Thatcher leaned back in his chair. "As you can see," he said, tapping the forged affidavit, "medical evaluation supports cognitive decline. My client," he nodded toward Sloane, "is acting in their best interest." Sloane lowered her eyes modestly. "I just want to make sure the estate is preserved," she said softly. "Preserved." The developer nodded slowly. "And the subjects?" he asked. "Disoriented. They wandered during last night's storm. Authorities will be notified shortly." Wandered, like livestock, like burdens. Sloane folded her hands neatly on the table, controlled, composed. The developer flipped another page. "Transfer effective upon wire confirmation?" "Yes," Thatcher said. "Apex Heritage receives initial funds. Disbursement follows." Outside, gravel crunched again. This time heavier, more deliberate. The developer glanced toward the window. Thatcher did not. He was too focused on closing. The front door opened, not slowly, not cautiously, decisively. Rain had returned in a light drizzle, and I did not wipe it from my coat. Water dripped onto the hardwood floor as I stepped inside. Cane in one hand, folder in the other. Silas followed behind me, standing straight, eyes clear, alive. No one spoke. The developer's pen froze mid-air. Sloane's face drained of color. Thatcher blinked once, twice. "Incapacitated?" I asked evenly. My voice carried through the room without effort. "I feel quite present." Silence. Heavy. Thatcher stood abruptly. "This is inappropriate. You shouldn't be out in this condition." "What condition is that?" I replied. He did not answer. Sloane found her voice first. "Mama, we were so worried. You disappeared." "I did not disappear. I stepped aside." I placed the wooden box on the table, slowly, deliberately. Before Thatcher could speak again, Gideon entered from the hallway. 2 uniformed state troopers followed him, boots firm, expressions neutral. Gideon placed a tablet on the table and pressed play.
Audio filled the room. Clear, undeniable. The notary will confirm capacity decline. By sunrise, this dirt is ours. The developer's eyes widened. Sloan stared at the floor. Thatcher's jaw tightened. The recording continued. Once the wire clears, Apex receives primary deposit. Your share disperses after processing. The trooper stepped forward. "Mr. Reynolds," he said calmly, "we have probable cause for fraud, elder exploitation, and attempted asset theft." Thatcher moved toward the door. Fast, too fast. He made it 3 steps. The second trooper blocked him. Handcuffs clicked, metal on metal. A clean sound. Final. Sloan remained standing by the fireplace, frozen. Her hands trembled slightly, but her face tried to hold composure. "This is a misunderstanding," she said. No one responded. The developer closed his portfolio slowly. "I'll be withdrawing from this transaction," he said quietly. Thatcher struggled briefly as the troopers secured his wrists. "You don't understand," toward Sloan. "We were close." Close. Not victorious, just close. I stepped forward and removed the pearl necklace from my daughter's neck. She did not resist. Her skin felt cold beneath my fingers. "You planned our absence," I said softly. "You miscalculated our presence." Silence filled the house as the troopers led Thatcher outside. The patrol car door shut. Engine started. Gravel shifted. Sloan stood alone in the center of the living room. No lawyer, no partner, no applause. Just the echo of her own decisions. And for the first time since she returned home, she had nothing to say. The house felt different that evening. Not lighter, not heavier. Clear. Silas sat at the kitchen table holding his original prescription bottle in both hands, studying it as if seeing it for the first time. "They almost convinced me I was losing myself," he said quietly. "That was the point," I replied. "Elder financial abuse does not always begin with force. It begins with suggestion, with planted doubt, with careful language. You are tired, you are confused, you need help." And slowly, autonomy shifts. Guardianship fraud hides behind concern. It uses paperwork like a weapon. It frames control as protection. It isolates before it removes. What saved us was not strength, it was awareness and preparation. Because legacy is not only land, it is foresight. I spent years believing love was enough to secure loyalty. It is not. Trust must be earned repeatedly, even within families, especially within families. Entitlement grows quietly when boundaries are never enforced, when rescue becomes routine, when accountability is postponed out of guilt. Sloan did not wake up one morning planning to erase us. She built towards it, step by step. Each time we solved a crisis for her, we removed a consequence. Each time we excused a shortcut, we strengthened a habit. That is a difficult truth to admit, but clarity requires honesty. If you own property, protect it. If you hold assets, structure them properly. If you sense manipulation, address it early, because waiting makes correction harder, and silence makes predators bold. Thatcher was charged with fraud, attempted asset theft, and elder exploitation. The shell company dissolved quickly once authorities began tracing transfers. Sloan was named in the filings. Whether she claims ignorance or partnership will be decided elsewhere. That part is no longer my burden. My responsibility was preservation, and that responsibility stands fulfilled. The orchard remains in Montgomery hands, not because of luck, because someone, generations ago, understood that paper can outlast ambition. That night, Silas and I stood on the porch watching the sunset over the rows. The air smelled like damp soil and early fruit. Still ours. You see, a grandmother's love may stretch far, but it does not erase betrayal, and it does not surrender legacy. In the South, we don't just bury secrets, we make sure they stay buried. If you think this can't happen to you, think again, subscribe. And if you still won't subscribe, explain why below. I want to know.